Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our WCNFluencer podcast. I'm your host, Christopher MacLellan, and Jennie Dopp from CaringTide. I have a very important question to ask you right off the bat. I know we're just getting to know each other, and you're out in Utah, but what is the name that you're selecting for your new hockey team?
No, I don't. I'm not. I hate to say it, I'm not a huge hockey fan.
Got to put you on. I'm putting you on the spot. Well, I'm going to give you mine though. I'm going to because I'm going to say the Utah Yeti.
There you go. I think that'll fit.
That'll fit. So I'm sorry to put you on the spot in our first.
We used to have a hockey team here, the Golden Eagles, years and years ago.
Yeah.
So of course, then we were invested, but when you just don't have a team close by and you grow up with it, then it's a little harder to connect. But we'll get there. Yeah,
I know. I'm kind of a big hockey fan. That's the Canadian part of me. And I've been following it from afar, and I saw this article yesterday. It's about everybody in Utah was submitting names, and they had the 6 finalists. And I said maybe I should have pulled those up to talk to you about them. That the Yeti really hit me, and I'm not sure why, but it just seemed like the Utah Yeti. I just think that's pretty cool. And then your basketball team is from New Orleans, and I have a connection to New Orleans, so I've always followed the Utah Jazz. So,
well, you should move here.
It's funny that you say that, because this is supposed to be about you, but I'm making it about me. I bowled professionally for a number of years. That was a whole other life ago. And that was one of the few cities where we never had a tournament in. But we always would drive through it on the way to California. So I remember driving through the mountains and seeing Salt Lake City in the valleys. Like, what a beautiful place. So
the Red Rock and the mountains. How can you go wrong, right?
And now that I know somebody out there, I'll just have to come and visit.
There you go.
So it's really great to visit with you. And I know our paths have crossed through a mutual friend. And everybody, when you think about it, there really are no strangers when it comes to caregiving.
Right.
We all kind of understand our journey and know the path and know the before and after. But one of the things that I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and we'll get into CaringTide for sure, is this emphasis on caregiving and families and children. There's this misnomer out there that caregiving is all about seniors, and that's really not the case.
Yeah, it is, especially from my lived experience. For caregiving for me, of course, started as being a mother in the typical, description of what a mother would be. But with my second child, Jackson, when he was 5 months in utero, just a normal doctor's appointment, ultrasound. And the doctor was chatting about his trip to Bali or whatever it was. And he kind of got quiet. And then he said, let's look at this. Let's look at his brain a little closer. And he identified that there was enlarged ventricles in the brain. So he referred me to a perinatologist, and we, were concerned, of course. We had another child who was very typical. And so this was a new territory for us. And the perinatologist kind of not blew us off, but just, if you were to look at hydrocephalus on a scale of 1 to 17, 1 to 9 or 10 is normal ventricle size, and 17 being severe hydrocephalus requiring shunting and all of this extra support. And with Jackson, he said he's about an 11. So you're probably just going to see some developmental delay. We'll just watch him. It'll be fine. And of course, we did see developmental delay, an emergency C-section. And, 2 days out of the hospital was our first, after an emergency C-section, was our first doctor's appointment. And, it just started. We just were starting at a sprint right at the beginning of trying to wrap our head around what we were going to be dealing with. And it wasn't until fast forward 7 or 8 years later, when the genome was finally mapped, that we were able to finally identify, after many rounds of fighting with insurance and testing for certain syndromes, that we finally identified he had a chromosome duplication. It's called 7q11.23 duplication. And he was the first in Utah diagnosed and the 11th in the world. And so he's truly a pioneer. But up until that point and after that point, it has been constant caregiving. While he's also on the autism spectrum, ADHD, oppositional defiance, anxiety, sensory processing disorder, just a slew of alphabet soup when it comes to, abbreviations. But it's been a lot of support, and I'm his person. And so, even though he loves other members of our family, I'm the person that he goes to for all of his needs and emotional regulation and all of those things. And so for me, caregiving has been a very tangible, visceral, emotional, all of the things topic. And caregiver fatigue is real. And that's something I can hold my hand up to the square and testify of, because it's a big job. And caregivers, I think one of the biggest things is you dedicate so much to the person with a need, and you get a lot of feedback like, oh, you're such a good mom, you're doing all the things. But there's this piece of it that you can't articulate to people very well or very often about how exhausting it is, because then they will say something like, well, our kids do that too, you're fine, or, but you're just doing so much for him. Look at all the good you're doing. He wouldn't be able to do this without you. We were chosen specifically for him, and all of these things that are meant to give validation and support.
Right.
I mean, not validation, but they're supposed to like lift you up, but it does the opposite. Sometimes it makes you feel invalidated. So yes, long story short, it's been a 23-year journey now with my son Jackson, and caregiving fatigue is real.
Caregiving fatigue is real, and no matter who you're caring for, the kind of the buzzword recently has been self-care.
Right.
And I kind of like to turn that around and say self-compassion. And recognizing and you've done it very well here. You understand that it's hard, and it's okay to express that. That's a part of that self-compassion that we all need, no matter where we are in our caregiving journey. But what you've done as an advocate as well is you've taken your experience and helped so many others, because I'm a firm believer that the best information and referral comes from one caregiver to another, especially when it's a specialized situation like you and your family have dealt with.
Yeah, I agree. When I was finally given the one piece of paper from our geneticist at our children's hospital, he called and he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but we did find something. And I was so relieved, because we had been testing and testing. It's not like there wasn't anything there and we were making it up in our mind. There were all sorts of signs that he was having trouble. And so when he gave me that paper, I was so relieved, but at the same time, I was so alone, because there were no resources. There was literally one page of information about this syndrome that had been newly discovered. And so we kind of had to forge our own path. And by doing that, I worked with another mother and she established, and then I ran it for about 10 years as the director of an organization called Duplication Cares. And Duplication Cares supported all of these individuals who were diagnosed with this rare syndrome. And so we were those supporters, those mentors of, another mother getting that diagnosis for her child and not knowing what the child's future would look like. Would they ever talk? Would they ever leave the home? Would they be able to get a job? Would they be able to go to a typical school? And so I think you're right. I think when you have other people on your path to mentor you, and it's almost like I can express what worked for us, and then you can express what worked for you. And the person listening can take the pieces that apply to them. And that's what's beautiful about mentoring each other and supporting each other and having a network system.
And I think that's one of the main components of this caregiving experience that we find ourselves in, is that we end up finding and meeting like-minded people that can help in the journey. And I think every caregiver, for the most part, understands the role that we find ourselves in. But when there's something a little bit more specialized, that isn't often talked about, because, like I mentioned earlier, there's more to caregiving than just senior care.
Right. Well, and I think too, there's tricky parts, right? You don't want to be a complainer, but at the same time, there's pieces of the caregiving that were easier than others. For instance, all of the doctor's appointments, even though navigating insurance and denials and appeals and all of those things were challenging, it didn't put me over the edge. And so those were service pieces where I was truly giving to my child and trying to help them achieve the life that they wanted for themselves and helping him have self-determination for his life. The pieces that were really hard for me are the pieces where I was out of my depth. When you get to things like mental health and your child running down the street screaming, or involving police, or when you have that dual diagnosis, with the mental health factors that come into play, it's a whole, even the doctors don't have answers for you. So how as a caregiver are you supposed to feel under control sometimes and successful, and that you are not going to kind of lose it yourself some days, to be blunt? It's a tricky deal.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
And balancing work and family and marriage, other kids, it is a delicate balancing act.
Yeah. And I think with our situation, I'm married to my partner of 30 years, and we've been teammates in this, but we've had to have separate roles because I'm Jackson's person. And for many of those years, I was the at-home caregiver. It all kind of fell on my shoulders a little bit. So while I could try to share, and also the systems we grew up 20 years ago where it looked different in families. And so I think we have a better grasp on sharing the mental load, sharing the caregiving load, sharing the household load, and now even sharing the monetary load of caring for a family, which I think we both feel more united in because we're both sharing the load more equally. And a lot of families who care for children who have a disability or a special health care need actually end up divorced or separated because the load is so immense. And usually it does fall on one person. So that's a key. The other piece that I think is important to bring up is the impact on siblings, because they are caregivers as well, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. But I have 3 other children, 1 older than Jackson and then 2 younger than Jackson. And they're all about 3 years apart. So they range in age right now from 26 to 18. But all of those children have grown up have a sense of PTSD almost, because they grew up in such an emotionally volatile home with a child that could not regulate his emotions. And the rest of the family had to walk on eggshells to try to keep peace because there were not, this is back when autism wasn't even supported by insurance. So there just really was not great support other than just trying to keep everybody alive and healthy. And so we also have to, when we think of caregivers, it's not only for an older population or those with disabilities, but it's caring for the siblings of those with a disability. It's crucial that they feel seen, that they feel heard, that they feel supported. And we could have done better. You do the best you can with the tools you have at the time. But that's part of the message, too, that a lot of organizations are trying to push forward is sibling support.
And by sharing your story like you have and the work that you're doing at CaringTide, it kind of just warms my heart because you're sharing your experience to help others. And there will be others that will go down this path as well.
Yeah. I think one of the heaviest things that is on a caregiver's mind is who's going to do this when I'm no longer here. Like, I can teach you how to navigate his doctor. I can teach you how to refill a prescription, but who's going to do what I do when I'm no longer here? And that's really the mission of CaringTide, is to help parents answer that question: who will care for my loved one when I'm no longer here? And some people, when I talk to them, because we work with families all across the country, and they'll, everybody's at a different place. It's an emotional decision. It's one that causes a lot of heartache. It causes a lot of sadness. And they think, okay, well, I have another sibling, or they have a sibling that will take care of them. We'll just leave the house to them. It'll be fine. And there's so many components and factors that go into it. First of all, is my daughter, Lexi, the best person to care for Jackson? Not because she couldn't do it, but is that fair for her? To have that on when she has her own little girl and her own family? What about the financial need? How much money do I need to care for Jackson across the course of his life when I'm no longer here? Have we saved enough? Have we put all of our eggs in a basket, and are we ready to go and pass the basket to the next caregiver? What about our home? Are we putting all of our assets in a special needs trust? Because if I don't, then I'm jeopardizing Jackson's Social Security and his Medicaid. And when I say Medicaid, there's two different types. There's healthcare, and there's also waivers that support his actual caregiving. And so many people outside of the disability world don't even understand those terms and what that means for Jackson's quality of life.
And that's goodness, I'm getting a little emotional here because thinking of some of the issues in our family with one of my nephews who's now in his late 50s, who wasn't expected to live to 10 years of age with cerebral palsy, and all the issues that went through there. And you were going back into the 60s and 70s, and when there was very little information about how to do any of this.
Right.
And I say this in all kindness and grateful. There's folks out there like you. I'm thinking of Eric Jorgensen and Christopher Bank and somebody that I want to introduce you to that are out in the forefront talking about this from real life experiences and helping those. Because I just feel it's so important when caregivers share their experience, that real life experience that you can't get from Dr. Google.
Right. Right.
You just can't get it. But for you to willingly share your experience and then be involved in this wonderful program at CaringTide, to be able to know that when you're talking to somebody, that they know instantly that you get what they're talking about. That is so comforting.
Yeah, I think it's important to work with people who walk the walk and talk the talk.
Right.
There's so many organizations out there that provide similar services, and they all are fantastic. Everybody does a great job, and their heart is in the right place. But what sets CaringTide apart is our model. We really do look at that holistic approach. We look at, what are the family resources that need to be in place? What are the pain points of this family? And as a disability navigator, my team helps the families identify what those are, because sometimes we're just going through the motions and white knuckling it every day. And we really have to get real with ourselves and say, this is where we're at. This is our starting point. You are here. And then from there, we can help them find their next right step and help them find the tools. The second piece is that financial piece. How much money do I need to really care for Jackson? I can't put that burden on my kids. And people think, oh, it's fine, they'll have Social Security. But really, when you look at a Social Security payment of $943, that wouldn't even pay for Jackson's. That would barely pay for a room to rent in someone's house, let alone an apartment.
Exactly.
And then the last piece is that legal support. We have to make sure legally I have things set up for Jackson. I can hope that if I leave, instructions in a letter to my kids, that my vision for what Jackson's quality of life will be executed. But things happen, financial situations happen, relationships dissolve. And I cannot, even people just think, oh, I'll just leave everything to my daughter. Well, what if my daughter separated from her partner and there was financial difficulties there? I'm taking a chance that the pieces I've set aside for Jackson, and I've tried to be equitable based upon circumstances, I need to protect Jackson's interests. And the only way I can do that is legally. And it's not just a will. You have to have that special needs trust in place in order to protect things adequately.
And I think one of the common themes across the board with caregiving is having these difficult conversations with family members, with siblings, with children, so that when an emergency comes, and we all know these are not planned, they just happen, that if we have some of these difficult conversations already in place, it makes that emergency just a tad bit easier to deal with.
Exactly. Well, one of the questions I ask parents is, okay, great, you already have your trust. Wonderful. Do you want us to review it for you? But the piece that they don't often have in place is, do you have emergency funding, emergency caregiving set up if you had a heart attack tomorrow? You're not passing away, but you're going to be out of pension for 6 weeks.
What if you become disabled?
Yes, exactly. So we really look at those pieces. Even one mom I was working with last night in Massachusetts, she doesn't have next of kin. She does, but she doesn't have anyone that could care for these 2 children that have a high level of need. And so that's what I'm helping her source right now, are guardianship options and
Right.
conservatorship options and trustee and executor options, because she's a savvy mom and she can do it, but she doesn't have the bandwidth because she's single and she's doing it all herself. And so that's where CaringTide steps in. We help people do the heavy lifting on some of these really tricky, sticky issues that are hard for caregivers to wrap their heads around.
And I think one of the other great things about CaringTide is it was established because of a story.
Right, right. Yes, our founder, Brady Murray, he's also here in Utah. He has several children that are adopted, and then he has several biological children. And I think 4 of his children have disabilities. And so he was having a conversation with his wife early on when they just had one child with Down syndrome. And she said, what are we going to do when we're no longer here to take care of Nash? And his automatic answer was, well, our older daughter will do it. And then they had to take a step back and think, no, what will her situation be like? Could she really do it? And Brady has 22 years of experience as a certified financial planner. And what also sets CaringTide apart is chartered special needs consultants. It's a special designation.
So important. So important.
Yeah. And it really gives us extra training that helps us ask these questions, because parents sometimes don't know what they don't know. And even the mom last night, she was very savvy, but she said, I can't figure out, and I haven't been able to talk to anybody to help me figure out how much I truly need to leave for these 2 children, because she's an older mom. And it's reality. Mortality is a reality for everybody. It's like that line from Joe Black, right?
Yeah.
The 2 things in life are death and taxes. And It's true for our community. So we have to figure out these questions, and we have to ask those hard things. And I can help families do it. I walk through the process with them every step of the way, and really help them know they're not alone in the process. It's hard. It's hard emotional work.
But I would, I'm going to just interject something here that I think fits that. It has to be gratifying also to know that you've taken from your experience to be able to help others, because you were once on that other side, not knowing what to do.
Right. It is. It's one of those things where I'm not perfect. I do this for, to help people. And I've worked in nonprofit work for a number of years, and it's definitely a philanthropic mission for me, to help families. And I don't even have it all together. Nobody does.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. And you know why? Is because I have a visual that I show families, and it shows these points of family resources, legal resources, and financial resources. And it's a wheel because it's always moving and changing. Relationships change. My husband had cancer, and so I've been a caregiver for him through a lot of our marriage with his different health challenges. And our situation is always changing. I remember when he was first diagnosed, and after we processed the diagnosis, I thought, oh my gosh, is our term life insurance still in place? Isn't that awful? But as a caregiver, I had to take action.
You got to take action, right?
I am going to be the sole provider for our family, and I have to figure this out. So that it's always moving. It's people's relationships change. You move, you lose jobs, you gain employment, you lose money. Your children move out. It's always changing. In fact, even just this week, my one daughter has moved away with her baby, and then I have 2 other children who are just away from the home for about 2 weeks on different experiences that they're having. And Jackson all of a sudden is in this environment where it's just me and my husband, and the energy in our home has changed, and the vibe has changed, and it made him sad that first day. He just said, I'm so alone here. And so I knew it was coming, but because the other 2 haven't quite launched fully yet, I knew we had some time. But it's even those pieces that I help families figure out. Where are the community events? How are we going to get transportation for work now that we've lost these 2 other drivers? All of those pieces,
all those balancing things that you
wholeness to life. Yeah.
So walk me through a process here that if a family was to contact you and a CaringTide, what is is there an intake process? How does somebody get connected to the
Yes,
services?
great question. So when they reach out to CaringTide, they submit a client profile and they just let us know the basics about their family. And we just look to see if we're a good fit. Would our services really help you in any of the areas? Some people already have things put together. Other people need a lot of help. And so once they go through that intake process, then we can pick apart and see which pieces are the best fit for you. Do you want to work with our disability navigator? Like last night, the mom in Massachusetts has a lot of assets. She has that piece figured out. She already has a trust. What she really needed was me helping her figure out guardianship. Other people already have, maybe they have younger kids, so they're not in that transition to adulthood stage, or they're just still in the depths of caregiving. So the pieces they're really worried about are that special needs trust and the financial planning and making sure, okay, if my husband dies of cancer, it's better to have insurance before you get diagnosed with cancer than after, right? And
Yeah,
so they really,
it changes a little bit after the
yeah, it
diagnosis.
does, right? So there's all of those pieces. It's kind of like the saying that you hear with autism. If you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism. But if it's like that with our situation too with CaringTide, we meet families where they are. We assess, okay, how can we help you? Where are the biggest gaps in your plan of care? And let's figure out the next right step. And again, we can't do everything at once. No one has enough money or bandwidth to do everything at once.
Right.
I mean, some people do if they're, mega wealthy or mega set, but we just work with families ongoing, one step at a time. What's your next right step? Your next right step right here is let's get the behavior. Let's find you some resources for behavior. Your next right step, you are missing a huge gap. You don't have any life insurance to cover your income or your spouse's income or your partner's income. It's just really unique, and it's work of the heart. It's connecting with families where they are, listening to their story, hearing them, and then helping them find a path forward.
Oh, goodness. I'm so privileged in my 15 years in the care space to be able to talk to people like you who are making a difference, sharing their story, taking it to the next level to help others so that their journey can be just a tad bit easier. So, Jennie, I just so appreciate our time together. So let everybody know how they can get in contact with you. I'm sure we're going to do another podcast or two down the road here, but give all the contact information. And of course, we'll have everything in the show notes for everybody as well.
Yeah, sure. So if you want to reach out to me personally, my email address is Jennie, and it's spelled a little bit differently. So let me spell it for you. It's Jennie, JENNIE, at caringtide.com. And you can follow us on Instagram at CaringTide, and also on Facebook at The CaringTide. We had to add the there for Facebook. And then our website is caringtide.com. So there's assessments a quiz, a family assessment quiz you can take on our website. We have resources on our website. We're just happy to connect you with any resources that will possibly be a good fit for you. We're here to help.
And coming from an information and referral service background like I do, I have to say that your website is one of the best I've seen. It's so easy to maneuver and find information. So I would encourage everybody to go and check out caringtide.com. And Jennie, what a delight visiting with you. And, with all the great work that you and CaringTide are doing, you're certainly a WCNFluencer. And thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Christopher. I really appreciate it.